You're standing at the bar and it's your turn to grab the round. You pull out that heavy, matte black metal credit card, and as it clinks against the mahogany, you feel like a total boss. You're thinking about the 3% cash back you're getting on this transaction, and you're mentally calculating how many points this puts toward your next flight to Tulum. Your friends are impressed, you feel successful, and for a fleeting second, you actually feel like you've made it. But then, the next morning, you're scrolling through your banking app with one eye closed, trying to figure out why your available balance is 3 digits lower than you thought it would be. You make good money, maybe even great money, but somehow you're still playing this weird game of financial Tetris every single month. You look rich, you act rich. And you definitely smell rich, but your net worth is essentially a fancy watch and a pile of rewards points that won't even cover a domestic flight. My name is Sam, and I spend too much time thinking about the psychological traps that keep you working a job you hate to pay for a life you don't have time to live. If you want to stop the performance and actually start building a stack of cash that gives you real freedom, hit that subscribe button. We don't do budgeting for beginners here. We talk about the stuff that actually keeps smart people broke. Here's the thing about 2026. Looking rich is cheaper than it's ever been, but actually being wealthy is becoming a luxury. We've been sold this idea that wealth is a lifestyle you put on like a designer jacket. But in reality, wealth is the stuff nobody sees. It's the money you don't spend. It's the silence of a paid-off car and a bank account that doesn't make you sweat when you open it. The problem is that most of us have picked up these pseudo-rich habits that feel like smart financial moves in the moment, but they're actually just anchors dragging your net worth to the bottom of the ocean. It's like trying to run a race with your shoelaces tied together. You're putting in all the effort, but you aren't going anywhere. The first habit that's killing you is the points and rewards obsession. Look, I get it. You think you're outsmarting the banks. You're putting everything on your card to get that 2% back or those 5 times points on dining. But here's the psychology they aren't telling you. Study after study shows that people spend significantly more, sometimes up to 18 or 20% more, when they use a card instead of cash or even a debit card. You're so focused on getting $10 back in points that you don't realize you spent an extra $80 on stuff you didn't even want just to maximize your rewards. Let's do some quick math. If you spend $5,000 a month to get $100 in points, but you could have lived just as happily on $4,000 by being more intentional with cash, you aren't winning. You're paying $900 a month for the privilege of getting a free $100 back from the bank. That's a losing trade every single day of the week. Then there's the buy it for life trap. This is the one where you justify spending $400 on a pair of boots or $1,000 on a professional-grade espresso machine because it'll last forever and save me money in the long run. Here's the thing. It only saves you money if you actually had the $400 to spare in the first place. If you're putting forever items on a credit card while you have a $0 emergency fund, you aren't being a smart consumer. You're just using a fancy excuse to overspend on luxury goods. You're prioritizing the quality of your boots over the quality of your financial security. A $100 pair of boots and $300 in an index fund will always be a better financial move than a $400 pair of boots that might last 10 years. Let's talk about the 0% financing lure. This is the habit that makes you feel like a financial wizard because you're using the bank's money. You buy a $5,000 sofa or a new MacBook and put it on a 12-month interest-free plan. You tell yourself that by keeping that money in your high-yield savings account, you're earning 5% interest while paying 0. It sounds brilliant on paper, right? But psychologically, you just committed your future income to a depreciating asset. When you have 5 or 6 of these 0% payments stacked up, your monthly cash flow is decimated. Let's run the numbers. If you have $800 a month tied up in interest-free payments, that is $800 that isn't being invested in the market. Over a year, that's nearly $10,000. If that $10,000 was invested in an S&P 500 index fund instead of sitting in a couch, it could be worth $20,000 in 7 or 8 years. Your 0% deal actually cost you $10,000 in lost opportunity. Habit number 4 is the bulk buying fallacy. You go to Costco or Sam's Club and you feel incredibly responsible because you're buying 48 rolls of toilet paper and a gallon of mayonnaise at a unit price that would make a CFO weep with joy. But here's the reality for most middle-class households. Bulk buying often leads to bulk consumption. When you have a massive stash of something, you use it faster. You aren't saving money. You're just increasing your baseline of waste. Plus, you're tying up $200 in pantry staples that are going to sit there for 6 months. That's dead money. It's cash that could have been working for you elsewhere, but instead it's literally sitting on a shelf in your garage getting dusty. Then we have the treat person syndrome. You know exactly who I'm talking about, and it might be you. This is the habit of being the person who always picks up the tab, always buys the round, or always brings the expensive bottle of wine to the party because you want to be generous. Look, generosity is a virtue, but if you're being generous to maintain an image of success while your retirement account is empty, that's not generosity. That's a status tax you're paying to feel important. You're buying the approval of people who probably wouldn't be there if you were eating ramen. Every time you treat the table to a $200 dinner you can't afford, you're pushing your retirement date back by another week. Do that once a month for 10 years, and you've just worked an extra 2 years of your life just to be the cool guy at dinner. The 6th habit is the "I'll make more later" mindset. This is the most dangerous one for high earners. You feel rich because your salary is climbing, so you don't worry about your spending today. You think, "I'm a doctor," or "I'm a senior dev. I'll be making 50% more in 3 years anyway." This leads to lifestyle creep that is impossible to reverse. You buy the house with the big mortgage and the car with the massive lease because you're betting on a future version of you to pay for it. But life happens, layoffs happen, burnout happens. If you spend like a rich person before you actually have the net worth of a rich person, you're just a high-income, broke person. You're one bad quarterly review away from losing everything, and that's a terrifying way to live. The final habit is what I call pseudo-investing. This is when you spend money on things that you tell yourself are investments, but are actually just expensive hobbies. Maybe it's a classic car or a collection of designer bags or even a house that is way bigger than you need because real estate always goes up. If it has a heartbeat, needs a roof over its head, or requires a monthly insurance payment, it's not an investment, it's a liability. True investments pay you to own them. Everything else is just a very expensive pet that you're hoping someone else will buy from you for more than you paid. Now, for the counterintuitive twist that might actually ruin your day. The more money you have sitting in your checking account, the more likely you are to be feeling rich, but staying broke. I know, that sounds backwards, but here's the thing. When you see a big balance in your checking account, your brain's spending guard goes down. You experience something called decision fatigue, and you start saying yes to things you would have said no to if that balance was lower. The wealthiest people I know actually keep their checking accounts relatively dry. They move their money into investments the second it hits their account, so they feel a little bit broke. When you feel a little bit broke, you make better decisions. You look for value. You don't buy the extra round at the bar. If you want to actually be rich, you have to stop letting your bank account convince you that you've already arrived. So, what should you actually do? Here is the practical takeaway. For the next 30 days, I want you to perform a status audit. Look at every single dollar you spend and ask yourself one blunt question. Did I buy this because I actually needed it, or did I buy it so I wouldn't feel out of place? If you find yourself justifying a purchase with words like points, quality, or it's a great deal, put it back. Start moving your money into an account you can't see on your main banking dashboard the day you get paid. If you don't see it, you won't spend it. Force yourself to live on 60% of what you make and watch how fast your feeling rich turns into actually being wealthy. The goal isn't to look like you have money. The goal is to have so much money that you don't care what you look like. Wealth is what you don't see. So stop trying to make everyone look at you.